and I can't deny the fact that you like me right now. You like
All right, award of the week for this week goes to the New York Knicks. And I promise you, it's unbiased. I'm just, giving the New York Knicks the award of the week for being the beacon of hope as far as NYC sports is concerned. I don't know if people have been noticing, but the city of New York, due to the fact that the Yankees were eliminated, it's been confirmed that in the calendar year of 2021, no New York sports team will win a championship. So it is officially 10 years from the last New York championship team, which was the Super Bowl 46 New York Giants. When that fact was presented, it was amongst all of the New York sports teams for the most part are within like some very murky waters. Also the 10 years thing is it coincides with the term of Mayor Bill de Blasio, who is a Boston Red Sox fan. I can't remember what his other sports teams are, but I believe like based on his ridiculous Brooklyn Nets get up that he leans Nets more than he does Knicks. But he stated in his initial, I believe, on his election, because he was elected in November of the year. The Giants won the Super Bowl, and he stated that if any New York sports team had won a championship, that the team itself would have to foot the bill for the championship celebration and parade. It wasn't. I don't think it was intended to be like an anti New York sports thing. It was meant to be part of his democratic stance, which was he didn't want to put more onus on taxpayers or have unnecessary spending for taxpayers, and that's why he said it. But it was just ironic that he stated that, and then New York teams eventually went on to not, it ended up being a moot point because New York sports teams didn't win any championships. We had the Rangers were in a Stanley Cup and lost to the Los Angeles Kings in 4 games in 2014. The New York Mets were in the World Series and lost in 5 games to the Kansas City Royals. And then the Yankees were 1 game away from the World Series in 2017, and the closest they've gotten since then was Game 6 of the American League Championship Series. So it's just interesting that it coincided with New York sports team. Him saying that coincided with New York sports teams not winning anything. So it'd be interesting if whoever the next mayor is, they open up by saying like, I don't care who wins, we're footing the bill, and then instantly a New York team wins a championship. But just going through the teams, I can't really get too much into hockey because I support the New York Rangers, but I know nothing of their team composition and where they stand. I do know they were last rebuilding, but who knows? They might surprise. I know nothing about the Islanders. I think they're pretty like close to like the hierarchy in the Eastern Conference. But go Rangers. Giants and Jets, they both started off 1-4 as of Sunday, and both wins were in overtime. So literally, both wins came by the skin of their teeth. The Mets are still the Mets, who were the first team to spend, I think, like 100 and something days in first place and end up with a losing record. It's just that now they have a owner who's just as manic and bitches on social media just as much as their fans do. So I guess that's nice. And the Yankees, they're getting lopped by the teams that are in front of them. Boston won a World Series, rebuilt for like 2 years, lost, traded their biggest star in Mookie Betts, and they're back, on their way possibly to another World Series. All before the Yankees did. The Rays, of course, won the division by 8 or 9 games, and basically have been, treating the Yankees like they're the small market team. Houston, of course. You know, the first time around 2017, you could say they cheat. You know, you could make an argument that their win over the Yankees was ill-gotten, but you can't say the same thing about 2019, and you can't say the same thing about the other 4 years they went to the American League Championship Series, including this one. And of course, there's teams behind them that could also, close the gap on them, as Boone, who hopefully won't be the manager of the Yankees, but I'm hearing reports that, Boone's most likely staying, but he said, the gap is closing on the Yankees because, you have teams like the Angels, the Mariners, the Blue Jays, the A's are always surprising, and who knows, before you know it, the Orioles might stockpile all of these high draft picks, and they start playing well, and all the teams in the Central start their rebuilds might be a little quicker, just like the Red Sox. So, admittedly, they ended up in the second wild card spot, but we all know there's no third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth wild card spot for them to fall into. And then the last New York team, other than the Knicks, the Brooklyn Nets, they announced today that Kyrie Irving, due to his unvaccinated status and his stance against getting vaccinated, will be sitting for the foreseeable future until he's eligible to play again. Meaning either he gets the vaccine or New York City lifts the mandate on being vaccinated, because the NBA has mandated that if you're playing in where the games are being played, if you're playing in a city that mandates people in indoor venues to be vaccinated, players must be vaccinated, and he's refusing to do so, which is odd, being you play in New York City, which has a vaccine mandate. So that would mean you wouldn't be able to play in front of your home fans. You won't be able to play in 41 home games. You won't be able to play in 2 games against the New York Knicks, and you won't be able to play in games on the road against other cities that have vaccine mandates. So that leaves the New York Knicks, which are 100% vaccinated, and these days they're not the Knicks of old, where there's a lot of drama surrounding them, and as usually that clouds the on court accomplishments, which there weren't any accomplishments, but the team, they're looking really good. They've won both of their preseason games by double digits. I'm really excited. They're maintaining cap space. They have all their first round picks, and the future really looks bright for them. And admittedly, like Brooklyn, even without Kyrie, are probably a lot more closer to a championship with James Harden and Kevin Durant. But even if they won a championship, like New York don't even like mess with the Nets like that. So that championship parade, assuming whoever the next mayor of New York, who's fitting the bill, it might not be that much, because it might not be that much people. So they get an award for the week for being the beacon of hope for New York City sports teams. Honorable mention I would like to give to Daniel Craig for an unprecedented tenure as James Bond, where there was a lot of firsts. I think he was routinely the first James Bond who did movies where he didn't sleep with the main Bond girl. So, the lead actress in a movie wasn't reduced to just being, a disposable female or a sex object. A lot of people initially, when he got hired before Casino Royale, didn't like the fact that, as opposed to the other Bonds of the past, he was, blonde haired and blue eyed. And for a lot of people now, they might closely associate the role of James Bond with Daniel Craig, because he did such a phenomenal job. He's the first James Bond to have the entire tenure of his James Bond career where the movies were interconnected, because all the movies before used to be pretty much like standalone with barely any references to the previous movie or the movie that followed it. I realized when I was going to the theater to see No Time to Die, he's the first James Bond to actually leave the role on his own accord. Sean Connery left, and they basically had to beg him to come back, because George Lazenby didn't want to continue the role. And in the first movie, that they did without Sean Connery, so they felt they still needed his star power. So he begrudgingly came back for the money, admittedly, and then left the role. Roger Moore basically just became too old for the role and just left after his last movie. I said it before that the Bond girl in the movie, Tanya Roberts, her mother was younger than he was. Timothy Dalton, he did two James Bond movies in the late 80s, but there was a struggle with the ownership of the franchise. So he was meant to do a third movie, but in the long period between, while the ownership was being disputed, he left the role and then not opened the door for Pierce Brosnan. So Pierce Brosnan came in and he took over. And then he did Die Another Day, which was critically panned, and even though it did well in the box office, and he also started to get up there in age as well. So all of that led to them moving the franchise in a different direction and hiring a new actor, and that actor became Daniel Craig. So he's the first one I got to send off, and I don't want to give too much away for the people who haven't seen No Time to Die. If you're not a James Bond fan, it's still an excellent movie to go to watch. If you're a James Bond fan, it is beautiful, and it's essentially a love letter to the entire franchise and a love letter to Daniel Craig and his entire tenure as James Bond. But something I didn't get to discuss a couple weeks ago was how I really got into James Bond. I didn't get to mention a person that put me on to James Bond, which was a gentleman by the name of Wentworth, who I first met. Cool dude, Jamaican, but he was Jamaican, but he was raised in England. So he talked and he had his English accent, and he was for some I can't remember. I think it was in between Die Another Day and Casino Royale, and he was just going through the whole history of the series with me, and I just became fascinated by it. I got hooked. He was just going through the whole thing. He told me about, how much it meant to him that Ian Fleming would write the James Bond books, some of which I've shown. He would write the books down in Jamaica. He had a property called GoldenEye, which they eventually used for a title of the movie. He would write the books there, which eventually became all these James Bond movies. So he personally felt connected to it, and I kind of personally felt connected to the James Bond series through him, because he told me the whole history of it. I knew of like Sean Connery. I didn't know like Sean Connery used to be James Bond when he was younger. I didn't even know James Bond was around for like 4 years at that point. And several different people had been playing him before. Like my idea was like Pierce Brosnan was the first one up until that point. And then I just fully immersed myself in it. So bought all the movies, watched all the movies, bought virtually all the books. I think I've read all of them. I'm still working on From Russia with Love and Goldfinger, but I've read virtually all the other books, and I just became a huge James Bond aficionado, and it's all thanks to Wentworth. So I haven't talked to him in a while. We used to always talk often, but if this ever comes across to him, thank you for making me such a big James Bond fan. And again, honorable mention goes to Daniel Craig, who did such a fascinating job as James Bond. And he brought, basically a character that was established, post World War II in the books, and then brought to the films in, the Cold War era, and helped along with the other James Bond, the other actors that portrayed James Bond, to carry this person through the different eras and basically be a reflection of the time they're in, instead of just maintaining the character that Ian Fleming created, but just, progressing as time goes. And that's awards of the week.